Good morning, folks. It's looking like it's going to be a beautiful day here at Wishwell Farms. Hope you're all doing well. Welcome to our farm. Tomatoes are looking fantastic. And let me show you something that I discovered yesterday. Looky there. The first tomatoes of the 2025 season. All right, now I'm going to show you guys one of the most important tasks that I perform in all 4 of my hydroponic tomato greenhouses first thing every morning for the 7 months that they are out here growing. And if I were to skip this important task, it could cost me dearly. But first, we're going to shut off some of these noisy fans. Between the fan jet and 6 inflator fans, it's a bit noisy in here. Hopefully now you can hear me just a bit better. So the first thing I do every morning is I come out to my greenhouses to check the electrical conductivity, which is the fertilizer levels in the water that these plants are getting fed, as well as the pH. So I'm going to show you now exactly how I do that. So this is one of my most important tools on my farm, my handy dandy combo pH and EC meter. So I'm going to take off the cap, we're going to turn it on, and this is going to allow me to test my EC, which is the units for EC are MS, that's why it says MS there. I use pH and EC. So first we're going to test our feed water here in the blue mixing tank. I just have this stirring rod that I mix my fertilizers with. I put a drill on the end of it, but when I'm not mixing fertilizer, it works perfect for just stirring up this solution in here just to make sure it's mixed thoroughly to get an accurate reading on my meter. So I'm not sure if you can see that. I am currently feeding a 2.16. I'm shooting for about a 2.2 right now. So it's just a little bit on the light side, but not bad. The water temperature says 64 degrees Fahrenheit. We want that to be 70, but since it's first thing in the morning, this water has cooled down. But once it starts running and pumping a couple times, the water heater will eventually get my feed water to 70 degrees. So I'm not too concerned about that. Now let's check the pH. We want our pH to be between 5.5 and 6. Should be mixed up fairly good by now. And it looks like we're a 5.9. Hopefully you can see that. I'm happy with that. Now we're going to open my folder with my hydroponic records spreadsheet. Today's date, 3/25, and this section here in the bold outline is the feed, pH and EC. That's what we just checked. It was a 5.88, about the same as yesterday, so that's good. And the feed was only a 2.16. I think that's what it was. So yesterday we were feeding a 2.3. I probably turned it down just a little bit because that's just a hair on the high side for these young plants. We want it around a 2.2 right now, so that's why it's about a 2.16, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now we need to get the rest of these readings. So to find out how many ounces these plants were fed, I have this extra feeding tube and dripper attached to the feed line, where I capture what is being fed to one plant. I need to clean my bucket out. That's why there's a little bit of algae at the bottom, but it doesn't really matter because this is not being fed to the plant. This is just for measuring how much one plant was fed yesterday. So I pour that in there, and now it's ready to go for today's feeding. It looks like these plants were fed 28 ounces. So one cube, or one plant, was fed 28 ounces. That means the entire bucket was fed 56 ounces because there's 2 drippers in each bucket. So we're going to take this back up here. This just gets thrown out. And it was fed, one plant was fed 28 ounces. But you see I have feed up here times 2. I want to know how much the whole bucket got, which was 2 feedings, 2 cubes worth, so 56. Okay, let's throw that out. Now for the most important reading, the leachate. So here is the leachate. This is what is the runoff caught from feeding one bucket. So there's 2 drippers in one bucket. That means this leachate is the runoff from 2 plants. I'm going to pour that into my container and slide it back under the bucket to capture today's leachate. Now we're going to take this back up front and test the EC and the pH of the leachate. So what I'm hoping to see here from the leachate is about a 15 to 20% runoff over feeding. We don't want that to ever be dry. That means the plants are not getting enough. There should always be a minimum of 10%, but 15 or 20% runoff over and above what they have been fed is what we're looking for. And we don't want our EC, our electrical conductivity, which is just measuring the salt levels in the water, which is the fertilizer levels. We don't ever want that to be 0.5 higher than what we're feeding. So let's check it and see what we got. The EC is 2.69, 2.7. It's bouncing back and forth. We're just going to call it 2.7. So 2.7. Now, you can see I was feeding, let's just call what I was feeding a 2.2, even though it was just a hair under. I'm going to raise that to be at least a 2.2. And our irrigation just turned on. That's what that noise is. So, if that's a 2.2 and that's 2.7, we're just barely in the acceptable range. We are 0.5 higher than what our feed was. I'll give you a quick look here at what the irrigation is doing right now, doing its thing. Tank A, tank B of fertilizers, and pH down, sulfuric acid. It's all getting dumped and mixed in here. There's water coming out of this fill tube, spinning the mixture around, so it's mixing, and it's getting shot up through here, going through a filter system, through a solenoid, and feeding greenhouse 1. This is greenhouse 1, 2, 3, 4. All right, another very important number here we need to get. Looks like my markings are a little worn off. It looks like 12 ounces. So our leach ounces right here was 12. All right, got my calculator here. We're going to divide 12 ounces by what was fed to an entire bucket, which is 56. There we go. Our leachate was 21%. That's exactly where I wanted it. You can see yesterday it was all the way up to 63%. And that's because it was a very cloudy, blustery day, and the plants didn't need a lot of food, a lot of water. So they were just letting it pass on through. I could have made an adjustment ahead of time if I would have known it was going to be cold and cloudy, but when the plants are young like this, I would rather them have too much than accidentally starve them, because this, March weather, it can be up and down. It can be sunny for half the day, cloudy for half the day. It's just constantly up and down. So I'd rather have too much than not enough. So it looks like today is going to be fairly sunny. So I may turn that up just a little bit, because 20%, I would almost rather see that about 25%. And our final number, the pH. Now the pH always jumps up pretty high in the leach. It's always around 8. There's not much I can do about that. I mean, I could lower my feed to 5.5. That might help a little bit. But it looks like we're going to end up being around at 8 on the pH of the leach. And that goes right here. So now I've got all my important data calculated for my tall house. This is my tall house, greenhouse number 1. It's the first planting of the season, and it's 18 feet tall. That's why we call it the tall house. If you're curious about these other numbers here, that is the cycle length. That means the irrigation is going to turn on every 40 minutes. It's running for a minimum of a minute 30 right now, and a maximum of a minute 55. So I have my computer, which is the grower's choice here, set to water at a minute 30 minimum if it's under 67 degrees. And then it'll slowly ramp up to a minute 55 if it's over 78 degrees. So if it's ever between 78 and 67, it automatically can give it an estimated range between those two times. So that's just a quick synopsis of what I do first thing every morning in every greenhouse. So what I just did here right now, I'm getting ready to go out and do in 2 other greenhouses. Greenhouse number 2, which is right behind the camera, which is the one we call our longhouse, And I will also check our grape house, which is done a little bit differently because they're growing in coconut coir grow bags. But if you guys are interested in seeing and hearing more detail about why I do that, why I use those numbers to go by, let me know in the comments, and I can possibly do a follow-up video more in depth of everything I just showed you here. The bumblebees are out in full force today, pollinating the flowers. I know you can't see them on camera flying around, but I see them everywhere. I'll try to show you a few. The GoPro does a terrible job of focusing in close on things like this. What do you think about that, Tessie? Are you chasing those bumblebees? Have you been chasing those bumblebees, huh? They're fighting for pollen. So normally my entire greenhouse flowers out evenly, and there's plenty of flowers for the bees to go around to pollinate. But there's still some that have not opened up their first cluster of flowers. So there's not enough for these bees to satisfy them. So they're fighting for the same flowers, and they're being over-pollinated. So they're landing on the same flower over and over throughout the day and actually almost sucking it dry, making it shrivel up and turn brown. That is not good. We don't want that. We just want a simple pollination done once or twice, and then for that flower or that blossom to turn into a tomato, and the bees will move on to other flowers. So every other day I've been taking them down to the grape greenhouse where our grape tomatoes are. And I tried to do it this morning. I forgot to do it last night. So I came out this morning at 7 a.m. You know, the sun was already up partially and the bees were already out. So I missed my opportunity. You almost have to come out when it's still dark, around 6:30. And then I think it would have been safe to move them down to the other greenhouse, and then it could have pollinated those flowers. So that's kind of what I do, is I alternate one beehive, and I'll show you all this in a future video. We're gonna have a video designated just for talking about our bumblebees and pollination of our tomato plants. So we will have 4 greenhouses with tomatoes in them that need pollinated, but right now we only have 2 that are in the proper stage of flowering out that can use the bees. This greenhouse and the grape tomato greenhouse. So eventually we'll have all 4 greenhouses in the proper stage of needing pollinated, and I will move that beehive around to a different greenhouse each day to be pollinated. So one of the things Emma and I will be working on this morning is moving all of these dripper stakes out of the rock wool cube and putting them into the perlite like that. So now that these plants have been in this greenhouse for probably 2.5 weeks, yeah. Today is March 24th, and we transplanted them on March 3. So they have officially been in here for 3 weeks. So this should have been done last week. Usually after 2 weeks, the plants are anchored into these buckets full of perlite by then. And this isn't something that has to be done, but it is good practice. So when we first transplant these tomatoes, we want that irrigation stake to be right inside the cube, so because that's where all the roots are contained. But immediately these roots are starting to shoot down into this bucket of perlite, and after 2 weeks, you know, they're down here about several inches deep. So to help promote even deeper root growth down into this bucket, after 2 weeks, or 3, because it's been 3 weeks since I transplanted, we want to move these drippers over to the bucket like that. And now the irrigation is not going directly into the cube. The cube will dry out on top, but that's fine because all the roots are now down in this bucket. And this will even promote and facilitate more root growth down into the perlite where we want it. And that will keep it anchored in there really well. In a few more weeks, there will be so many roots coming out of these cubes into the perlite that I could pick up this bucket of perlite by grabbing the stalks and just lifting them. They will be anchored in that well. All right, I'm gonna take you down to the other greenhouse where we have our grape tomatoes and let you take a look at those next. Really happy with the way the grape tomatoes look as well. They have some nice flower clusters on them. Most of the plants are on their 3rd cluster. So there's 3 in a row right there. 1, 2, 3. In the prior video to this one, I demonstrated how we use the Florida weave to string up or trellis up our tomatoes to these steel T-posts. So if you're interested in checking that out, I will put the link down in the description box for you. Get him, Tassie. Where's that kitty at? There she is. By the way, our kitty has a name. This is Kipper. And she likes to roll around on concrete like she wants her belly rubbed or something. Kipper and Tassie, they love each other. Get that kitty. Look at that stupid cat. Boy, that thing's fat. I wish I could say she's fat because she catches all the mice on the farm, but that is from being overfed. What are you doing, kitty? You weirdo. I'm a dog man. Right, Tassie? Okay, any other greenhouse? Come on. Let's check out the other greenhouse. These plantings are looking excellent as well. Very happy with what I'm seeing. And they have officially outgrown the bamboo stakes. Time to pull these strings down from the trellis and get them attached. We're gonna do a quick sucker pruning. So we wanna get our suckers off of these plants when they're about 3 or 4 inches. We just throw them into this little pail, like a picking pail that straps on my waist. There's another bee going to town. But there's a sucker right there. I'll usually let them get about 3 or 4 inches. So if you look down this plant, there's another one right here. 2 more down here. 3 more. So those were all suckers. I normally don't waste my time picking these little guys. I'll let them get about that big. It's just easier to see them, easier to pick them. Now there's not always going to be 5 suckers on every plant. Since this is only the second suckering in 3 weeks since these plants have been in here, we haven't had a chance or needed to go all the way down the plant from the bottom to the top suckering. But now they're finally all starting to grow and we need to get them all off there. But in the coming weeks and months, we're only going to have a new sucker each week at the top of the plant. So usually just 1 per plant each week, sometimes 2 if one happens to get missed prior pruning. I will have a dedicated video in the coming weeks of how and why we prune all the suckers off of these plants. But for now, I'll let you watch me do a couple. They grow right in the corner of a branch, actually called a leaf, in the main stalk, and they just snap right off. You don't really want to cut them with scissors. You want to snap them. They'll heal up better by snapping them versus cutting them with scissors. There's a big one. We don't want them to get that big. That starts taking away from the plant. We want to get them when they're about 3 or 4 inches, just like this. So sucker removal is something that gets done each week, along with about 5 or 6 additional tasks that have to be performed on every plant in every greenhouse. Now, because the plants are small right now, suckering or sucker removal is the only thing that we are doing to the plants at this stage. But that will change very soon. There's a lot of man hours involved with maintaining, raising greenhouse indeterminate style tomatoes. But they're more profitable than growing it in a determinate style because these will continue to set fruit week after week after week all year round, as long as you are giving them light, heat, and feed and maintaining the plants. A determinate, more of a bush style tomato that you would have in the outdoors or in high tunnels like a lot of people grow, they're more of a hot set style tomato. They can yield very heavily still, but they tend to all come on at once, maybe over a month-long period, sometimes even just 2 or 3 weeks. But usually you get maybe a couple months out of them. And then they start fizzling out. And then the end of the season's here. So in here, in a controlled environment, growing the indeterminates, we'll have decent yielding tomatoes for as long as we can keep them going. But like I've mentioned in prior videos, we really only grow them for about 4 months before we terminate them and start harvesting out of our fields. All right, we're moving our drippers out of the cubes, and this is a perfect time to check them to make sure they are flowing right. And then we're sticking them down into the perlite. So we're checking every dripper, and into the perlite it goes. This only gets performed once a year, and it's kind of a on your hands and knees type of job. We have garden carts that we can sit on, but you're still bending over because this is pretty low. We aren't often working this low on the tomato plant. Just this one time. If we find one that's not dripping right, we will pull the whole entire hose off, make sure we can blow through it. And if we can blow air through it, we know the hose and stake is good, it's not plugged. And then after I shut the water off, I'll come back and I will replace the woodpecker dripper that's on the drip lines. This one looks like it's partially plugged up. Look at all the roots that are stuck on there from last year. Sometimes I can just give it a smack on a bucket, clear off the roots, but I'm looking at this dripper over here and it spurts water when I put my finger on it. So the dripper's good. I can't blow air through this one. So this is a perfect example of what we want to find, because these plants are in a very critical stage of growth right now. There's a root. You know, sometimes there's roots inside these tubes, these spaghetti tubes. Make sure I can blow through it. I'll smack that stake on a bucket, make sure there's no roots plugging up the little emitter area. Pop it back on. Now I can blow through it, put it back on the dripper, and as soon as I see water coming out, I know we're good to go, and into the bucket it goes. So a lot of times when we have one not working properly, it's not necessarily the dripper. It can be old roots or fertilizer residue and deposits stuck in the line or at the stake. Boy, the wind sure has picked up today. I got one more thing I want to work on in this greenhouse here. Along the baseboards, we've been fighting weeds for years and years that come up where there's not ground cover covering the few inches next to the baseboard. So I'm going to roll out some ground cover and get this weed problem taken care of once and for all. Since I only had one roll of ground cover, and to not waste a 3-foot piece, I rolled out a 3-foot roll and sliced it in half. And I tucked it underneath the existing piece of ground cover. And then I sliced it 6 inches at every post or bow, or I guess it'd be the ground stake. So you can see right here, I only have one 3-foot roll laid down, and now I have the 1.5 feet underneath it. I haven't tacked it all down yet. I'll show you what it looks like underneath. And I'm wrapping it over the baseboard about 2 inches. So when we get a warm day, I'll roll these sides up and I will staple it on the other side of the baseboard. That way it looks nice and clean and no weeds can come up. And then I'll push that down a little tighter and tack the old ground cover back down. I probably should have just ran ground cover through the entire greenhouse. I removed all these buckets and the leach tube a couple years ago and put a 6-foot piece right there because we were always fighting weeds back in this area. It laid a little bit wet just because the greenhouse pad was a little lower. Probably should have built it up a little higher here. So when it rains really heavy outside, there is a hill out there and it will get a little wet in here sometimes. That sure looks really nice where the ground cover is covering everything. I've been putting this off for like 3 years and we're finally getting it done. I'm just putting 3 staples in the top right now, and I'll probably put 4 or 5 more on the outside when we do that section. On a nice warm sunny day though, not today. It is cold and breezy, about 35. Not very comfortable outside today. Maybe there's a better way to do this, I don't know. I've done it a little differently over the years, but I think this is my best way of doing it so far. I think we'll be happy with this. I'm pretty sure weeds are not gonna be able to come up. Hopefully the ground cover doesn't fray real bad where I cut it, where I sliced it about 6 inches down to be able to get around these ground stakes and the hoops. We're tacking down the ground cover with these ground cover staples. And if we get any really hard dirt or stones or clay that we can't get these to go into, which happens from time to time, I use these galvanized 6-inch nails and they work really good. But most of the time this works just fine. My goodness, this is sustained 30 to 40 mile an hour winds today. And those ropes broke on that side wall of this greenhouse and that wall was flipping straight up horizontally. But we got her all fixed and tied down, ready to handle the rest of this wind today. Well, that's gonna be a wrap on today's video. Thanks so much for hanging out with me at the farm today, folks. I really appreciate it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the content, and I'll see you next time down on the farm.